Hey guys, welcome back to the blog. I am so excited that you guys are here today because you are in for a real treat with my friend Nicole Soto. We cover relationships and the Enneagram and coffee and ministry and just anything that you can think of. She is an incredible human, and I know that you guys are going to absolutely love getting to know her. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. Helps me out a ton, and we have a whole bunch of other interviews if you're interested, so go check those out. And yeah, let's get on to the video. Hello everyone, welcome back to the blog and channel. Today I am so honored to have the lovely Nicole Soto. Welcome!
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
So I told her before we started recording, I am such a huge fan of hers, and I appreciate her genuine just love for people. She's great, and I love her so much, and I know that you guys will get to love her too as we go through this. So to get started, just for people who may not be familiar with you, give them a little bit of your background, your family, what you do, your career, and then where you're involved in ministry.
Okay, awesome. So I grew up in a pastor's home, and my dad's been a pastor for almost 20 years now. I think it's 19 in 2019. So
Wow.
I've been a pastor's kid pretty much my entire life. I have two twin siblings. They're about to be 20, and they're so fun. So if you don't know who they are, they're really great. Um,
They're awesome.
they're really fun. I recently got married about 6 months ago. And this has been such an exciting journey and so much fun. Um, and then in terms of work, I graduated with a degree in marketing about 7 months ago. No, oh my word, it's been almost a year. So I graduated with my degree in marketing, and now I work doing event marketing, specifically for sponsorship for my company. So it's really fun. It's a lot of new challenges, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I love seeing how many different areas you're involved in. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. You're involved everywhere, and I love that so much. So you mentioned it a little bit with, going into your childhood. Whenever I look at people that are making a difference, I always like to think, okay, what did they do that prepped them early on, to get to where they were, to get to, to where they are today? Um, so, what were some of like the most impactful moments of your teen years? What was one of those moments that just stood out to you, of your teen years when you were growing up?
I think there were a couple different moments that were really shaping and molding for me. When I was about 13 or 14, we had a whole music team for my church that left, went to a different church. And so it was one of those weird moments in life where you're kind of forced into something that's totally out of your
Yes.
comfort zone, something that you're like, there's no way I can do this. But I think it's really just God stretching you and molding you. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I was kind of forced to basically take over music at 14, and it was something that I think really pushed me. And it's not even necessarily something that I feel like is like my number one calling, but I definitely think that it helped me in all areas of life to really just grow and be more and figure out how can I really be what God has called me to be.
Right.
So that really pushed me. That was, like I said, I think I was about 14 when that happened. Um, so that was definitely a shaping moment. And then I would say when I started my blog, I was like 17. So this was almost 6 years ago. And blogging was like a thing. Like it was
Right.
definitely a thing, but no one I knew how to blog 6 years ago. So like no one personally. So it was something that I was like, it was kind of made fun of in high school,
Mhm.
and people would just be kind of hateful. I was in my senior year, and people would just be like, "Oh, you're gonna put that on your blog." And eventually everyone was like, "Hey, how did you start that blog? Like
Right.
what steps did you go through to start the blog and everything?" So I think that kind of really transitioned me from really caring what other people thought about me so much, and really being a follower. It transitioned me to really being more of a leader and having more of a voice, and kind of being a little bit more confident in my decisions and not constantly relying on um, people's validation and affirmation. And I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And if people like it, great. If they don't like it,
Right.
great, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that was like a really defining moment because it kind of just changed me as a person.
That's awesome. I know, and what you said about, the first part when you were kind of thrown, if you will, into something is
Yeah.
it's crazy because a lot of times it's things that we had never like imagined that we would do. Like it's like
Yes.
until there's that need for it, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess, this is my time to do this." And it's crazy because God knows those things and he knows what down the road, like he knows how that's going to shape you, for your future. So, I love that. I love that so much. So what is like one of the most meaningful pieces of advice that somebody has given you from your teen years that you've kind of held on to?
One of the most meaningful pieces of advice. Well, my dad always knew from when I was really, really little that I wanted to write a book, and he would always encourage me to write basically any opportunity he could. He would always encourage me. Like if I would say I was bored, he'd be like, "No, go write something. You're not bored. Create something." So when I when I really became, I think maybe like 18 or 19, my dad really knew that I wanted to write a book and that it was
Mhm.
in my heart, and that, he knew that I had like a working title at like 19.
Mhm.
And he was like, you know what, you need to just do it. You don't need to wait until you're older. You don't need to wait until you're in a different part of life or a different season. You need to just do it. Like God has laid this on your heart, and you need to just go for it, because clearly God has called you to do this and he's equipped you. And I think just him really encouraging me propelled me to just write the book, and to do it even though I was definitely scared to publish it.
Right,
I would
right.
say that was probably a really great piece of advice for my teen years.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that too. I went to visit some of my family and my grandfather gave me that exact same advice. He was sitting at the table with his brother, and they both were talking about, I wish I would have done this whenever I had the
Yeah,
chance, and whenever I was young, I wish I would have just
right.
gone for it. And
Mhm.
they both looked at me and they were like, go for it. Whatever you want to do it while you're young and while
Yeah.
you have the chance and while you want to do it. Don't
Mhm.
be so afraid of what could go wrong, just go for it. And
Yeah,
I've stuck to that advice for 2 years now, and it's just like it's such
that's so
great
cool.
advice because we get so, bound with fear and worrying about, like you said, what other people think, and instead of just going for it. So I love that. I love that advice. Um, so you mentioned it earlier, but you have now been married for 5, 6 months now. And that is something that I wanted to cover today because I feel like you and your husband's relationship is something that young people everywhere look up to. Um,
That's so
Before
sweet.
y'all got married and then now after y'all are married. And whenever I was thinking about having you on, I always see you sharing this agenda that comes up where young relationships, young marriages, sometimes all we focus on is the struggles and the hardships. And while there are hardships and struggles, I love that the two of you celebrate what it actually is. I love that y'all share the good and the bad, but y'all celebrate, the love, y'all celebrate the joy of relationships and marriages. And so what is the biggest thing that you've learned from your relationship and from your marriage?
First of all, thank you for that very sweet compliment. That's so sweet. Um, I think the biggest thing that we've both learned throughout our relationship as a whole is really delayed gratification. And I talk about this a lot on Instagram. At least I try to. But I think it's something that people don't really understand when you're trying to build a life together. When you have all of these goals you're trying to accomplish. Financial goals, spiritual goals, life goals, you have to be willing to delay, the momentary satisfaction, um, and really just wait for that ultimate satisfaction, that pure satisfaction that
Yeah.
comes when you wait, when you put in the time, when you put in the effort, and you really just wait, and you earn it. Blake and I waited until we were married, and I think that this is like, that was something that was so, so crucial and so important to our relationship. And that really helped us, to trust each other and to
Right.
be accountable to each other before we were even married. So I think now we're reaping the benefits of waiting physically, waiting financially, just
Yeah.
saving like crazy while we were engaged. And
Right.
there were so many sacrifices that we made dating and being engaged that we're now reaping as a married couple.
Yes.
Um, and so I would say that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned, that what you sacrifice when, in the hard times, it all comes back. The Bible says you reap what you sow, and I'm
Hmm.
such a firm believer in that. What you sow, you end up reaping that. And so for us, I think that's like a huge, huge lesson that we've learned, that we try to tell our youth group. You might feel like you're making so many sacrifices right now, and you
Hmm.
are, but you know what? Down the line, it's going to pay off, and you're going to be so
Right.
grateful that you put that time and that work into it.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Um, just because it's so hard whenever you're like, we all want things now. It doesn't matter what
Yeah.
it is. I mean, if we're
Yeah.
talking about anything, we live in a world that's so fast paced. And so
Yeah.
learning that, virtue of waiting and patience is so hard. But in the long run, it pays off and it's great. So I love that. Um, what advice, like what's your number one piece of advice that you would give others concerning relationships, whether it be friendships or, your significant other? What piece of advice would you give them?
From a relationship standpoint, I would say be on the same page with your values.
Hmm.
If you can be on the same page, there's a statistic out there that's like, if you can be on the same page spiritually, financially, and then in your values, you pretty much have like a 95%, success rate in
Right,
marriage,
right.
which is huge. I
Yeah.
mean, so if you can really get on the same page spiritually and have the same goals and know, where you're both going ministry wise,
Hmm.
um, it's so huge. Financially, the same thing. There's so many fights that happen in
Right,
marriages because of finances. So if you
right.
really can like just get on the same page, I would say, I think people really were, I don't want to say like purposely hateful or unkind, but people would say like, "Oh, you're getting married really young. Like your
Hmm.
first year of marriage it might be really hard." And I just feel like it's been the complete opposite. But I feel like we were really, really on the same page with our goals.
Right.
And I think if we weren't, it would have been a very difficult first year of marriage. So I'd say just when you're engaged, when you're in premarital counseling, or even when you're dating, just really
Right.
have the hard conversations about like, what do we want to do long term? What do we feel like God's calling us to do long term? And what are the steps and the measures that we have to take to get there?
Yes.
So that would be like my relationship advice, I guess.
I
And
love
then,
that.
thank you.
I
And then friendship wise, I would say, I think it's really interesting, like, when you change seasons, like after being married, I think that there are friendships that you realize weren't really true friendships. I think that when you change seasons, you're like, these are my real friends. You kind of
Mhm.
realize.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good.
and I think, that happens for anything. If you're graduating high school, I think that's another huge change where
Right.
some friends are weeded out, and you're like, you know what, maybe God doesn't want them to be, an influence in my life or an impact in my life anymore. And it's kind of just like a weeding out process. And instead of being, bitter about it, instead look at it as, God's weeding out maybe the bad influences or the bad friends, and he's going to bring in people who will support you and will love you and will be your cheerleader. So yeah, I guess that would be my friendship advice.
That's great. I love that. Um, and so segueing into that, I want to start talking about your book. Um, I remember whenever Worth It first came out, there was a huge buzz about it, and it was like you hit a target big time. And so before we actually get into the book itself, I think that's something that being worth anything, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, that word alone, it hits a target for so many people. And so when what was your mindset? Why did you realize, when and why did you realize, hey, a book like this needs to be written, a book that addresses this, needs to be written? So what was your mindset before Worth came out?
Well, I think it really started a couple years ago. I really started kind of toying with the idea of writing a book. Like, seriously, I mean, I've always wanted to write a book since I was like 6. But I really started being serious about it when I was like 19, 20. And I think it kind of got to a point where my blog had grown so much. I was getting like 100,000 views on my blog. It was kind of at a point where I was like, originally I had started my blog purposely and purely for fashion content, and it was going to be a fashion blog.
Nice.
And about 6 months to a year into it, I just really felt God be like, you have more than that. Like, not that there's anything wrong with having a fashion blog, obviously.
Right.
But God just was kind of like, you need to do more. Like, there's more than just, the surface level. And so I really started just kind of sharing my heart, and the posts that did the best were posts about worth and inadequacy and vulnerability and just topics that are like heart issues, and
right.
That we can just kind of all relate to and that no one really ever talks about. So I knew that God had placed the title Worth It on my heart. And I didn't really know why. When my dad would ask me, my dad's an author too, so he would kind of ask me, what do you think it's going to be about? And I'd be like, I don't know, I just feel like this is the title, I don't know why. And then about a year after that, I really came to a place where I was so broken and so just unhappy, and really trusting in God and just trying to figure out like what he had for my life. And I truly just felt worthless. There was so many different situations that kind of unfolded, and I just didn't feel like I had any worth. And I remember like I was leading worship, and I got off the platform and I went to my dad's office, and I just sat at his desk while he was teaching Bible study on a Wednesday night, and I just wept. And I remember like almost like the clear voice of God, and not in an audible voice, but it was so clear. I remember God just saying, this is why your book is called Worth It. And I think that I really had to reach a point where I could relate to all these people who would eventually read my book. Like, I had to get to that place in myself where I was empty and I felt void of worth. And so that's pretty much how Worth It came to be. And then it really just evolved from kind of like a collection of essays to more of like kind of having a storyline. And so yeah, that's kind of how it came to be.
That's great. That's amazing. I know. And like you said, I feel like in our world today, it's played down to act like, you act like you're totally fine is what everybody wants. Nobody wants, to say that, hey, I'm struggling with this, or hey, I'm feeling this. And so for somebody to put that out there and say, I went through this, this is what I felt, and here's something to help you get through that. It's awesome. It's amazing. So for those that haven't read the book, describe Worth It to them, in a couple sentences, describe Worth It to them.
Well, it's my little what is it called? My little pitch that I always do when people ask. I just say it's a book about self-worth for young women from a biblical perspective. Nice. It really deals with things, just a variety of topics it deals with. The book kind of starts off heartbreak, and it starts off when you're in this broken place, and then I kind of start talking about your calling and being vulnerable and mentorship, and just a variety of topics that I felt like God placed on my heart that are kind of relevant for really anyone, but my target audience was really women, and young women specifically.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. So what was one of the most rewarding parts of the writing process for you?
I really love writing. I really haven't been writing lately, which is making me a little bit sad now that I'm thinking. But I love writing. It's really therapeutic for me. And so the process of writing is genuinely something that I just really enjoy. And I love sitting down and having like a movie music score in my
Uh-huh.
earphones and just sitting and just like
Right.
all in focused. Um, but also because I put a deadline on myself, it
Hmm.
started to get a little bit like, okay, this
Yeah.
is past fun, and now it's like this is the
Right.
hard
We've got to
work,
get it
you
done.
know? Yeah. So yeah, it started getting a little bit crazy at the end, and just making sure, my editor and I like had all the deadlines, set up correctly, and that it would be out before Congress and all of that, all of that stuff. So, but I
Fun.
think
Wow.
now the most rewarding part is like reading people's reviews and the messages that I get and the emails. I've gotten letters from people. Like it's
Wow.
crazy. Like just emails from people from different countries. I got a message from somebody from France today, and it's just
Oh, wow.
that's what's like the most rewarding part now.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
people's feedback and knowing how it's impacted them. So that's, oh my goodness, it's so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the part where you're just like you sit back and you're just like when they all start coming in, you're just
Yeah.
like, wow, like, wow, that's
I
awesome.
just never expected that. Yeah. It's very
That's
humbling.
awesome. That's awesome. So, you mentioned it earlier, but you and your husband are both involved in ministry. And I think one thing that also, that kind of ties into y'all's relationship as well is the fact that y'all went straight from, you just got married and now you're in ministry. And I think that's another thing that people look up to a lot. And you mentioned, you were raised in a pastor's home. Um, so what prepared you early on, to be involved in ministry? So it was a natural progression, for you. So what prepared you early on, to be involved in ministry?
I would say it was just kind of like really a way of life for our whole
Mhm.
family. So my parents had been pastors for almost 20 years, and then for 5 years before, or for 10 years before that, they were youth pastors. And they grew an incredible youth group. I mean, there are so many pastors and evangelists that have come out of their youth group. So
Mhm.
I think just kind of watching their life and watching them really sacrifice so much, I think prepared me for ministry in the sense that I knew really what ministry entailed, like truly. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't under the impression that like it's, super I don't want to say it's not rewarding, but it's not always like fun and games
Right.
and
Right.
cool stuff and cool trips like that.
Mhm.
I didn't really ever know that side as much.
Right.
My parents started a church from nothing
Mhm.
um, when I was 5. And so just watching them grow that my whole life really, I think, has prepared me so much for ministry because I've seen the hardest parts of ministry.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes when you grow up, people think, if you grow up in a pastor's home, it must have been like a life of privilege, but I just never had that. So I feel like it really prepared me for like honest to goodness ministry. Like this is what it really is that it's
Yes.
serving people, it's being in the trenches, it's, praying for people, it's teaching Bible studies on a weeknight after work, like
Right.
that's what ministry is. So I think that just watching them and watching their example probably really prepared me for
Yeah, that's great. And I can totally relate to what you're saying. I was a pastor's kid for 7+ years, home
oh
missions work.
wow,
And
that's so
so I
cool.
totally get what you're saying, where being
Yeah,
involved at that stage, you learn the hardest parts and, the greatest parts. But I
yeah.
definitely get what you're saying. Um, so what's the biggest thing, being involved in ministry has taught you over the years? What's, one of those big things that it's taught you?
um I think it's taught me a lot about people. I think it's taught me a lot about um, really serving when
Mhm.
people walk away. I think that's probably one of the hardest things. I posted something on Instagram yesterday. The keys to ministry. It wasn't like an original thought. It was something I reposted. But a thick skin and a tender heart. And
Mhm.
sometimes
Yes.
it's so easy to get those two things confused. And it's so something
Yes.
I constantly pray about because I have a very tender heart, but it's hard for me to have thick skin. It's hard for me to not
Yes.
take things personally. Um, it's hard for me not to be offended and become bitter, and it's something that I have to pray about,
Yes.
um, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned is just not confusing those two things, because
Mhm.
in ministry, um, people will hurt you, people that you invest in and you
Right.
give to, they will hurt you. But I think really giving people the benefit of the doubt and knowing that everybody's human, and
Yes.
if not for the grace of God, like that would be me. I
Right.
think that just kind of remembering that and keeping that in mind, and really just allowing God to just heal those wounds and help you move on. Like that's probably like the main thing that I think I've learned.
Yeah. And I feel that too, just when people walk away, then
Hmm.
accepting them back and like forgiving, and it's sometimes so hard to just forgive and forget, but
Yeah.
then you've got to bring that ministry aspect back into it and be like, you know what, I could be them, just like you said, I could be them, and
Right.
what would I want? I would want to be accepted, I would want to be loved,
Right.
no matter what. So I love that. um One thing, whenever I was going to have you on, I wanted to cover is your education, your college path that you took. And I love that you chose college. I'm very passionate about that myself. So I wanted to talk about that. So share with us, what is your degree in and why did you choose it?
So I have a bachelor's of science in marketing,
Hmm.
and basically my college was kind of interesting in the sense that I had basically all of the business classes, and I definitely specialized in marketing.
Hmm.
But my school was very much like, you're going to have finance classes, you're going to have accounting, you're going to have um, management, you're going to have all the things, which was not what I thought I was signing up
Right.
for. I was trying
You're
to
like,
like get out
okay.
of the math. Yeah.
Right.
And it just didn't happen. But so took a lot of calculus. But
Fun.
right, calculus is the worst. But yeah, so that's what my degree is in, and I'm really glad that I chose that overall.
Hmm.
Um, I think I would be really bored doing something else. Not to say that I'm never bored, but I think I would
Right.
be more bored doing something.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, and then what was the second part of the question?
What made you choose it?
Well, I love the fact that marketing is really creative and that I can kind of add my own stamp to things and kind of have a say in the
Right.
direction of a company's brand and how they're choosing to portray themselves to their customers. I like that I kind of have a little bit of a say in that. I knew that I kind of wanted to go into business. In
Mhm.
an alternate universe, I would have been like an English teacher, but that was an alternate universe. So
Right.
um, I figured business would probably be something that I could use, all across the board in church. I do use it at
Right.
church, Um, and it's just a good career. You can always get a job in business, and I knew
Right.
that. Um, and yeah, I think it just allows me to be creative. It's definitely not finance or accounting, no offense to anybody.
Right,
My mom's
right,
an accountant, but I was like, that's just not for me.
right. I feel you. I feel you. It's not my
Yeah.
not my strong suit either. So why was having a college degree important to you personally?
Um, Education was always really, really important in my house. My mom is like a genius. Like she's a senior accountant. She's straight
Wow.
A student her whole life. And so she really instilled that in me and in my siblings early on. Like there wasn't really an option. I mean, they didn't force us to go to college. We paid for
Right,
our own
right,
college and everything, but it was just kind of like our whole lives. Like, oh, you go to high
right,
school, you go to college. Like it wasn't really like we just all were like, oh, okay, this is like the next step,
right,
basically.
right.
Um, I think it's really important because I think secular college gives you kind of an edge.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's a really, really cool edge because you meet people from all around the world. You meet people of so many different backgrounds. I went to a university all 4 years. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I was teaching Bible studies to people that I would never, ever have had the chance
That's
to have met,
great. Yeah.
anywhere else. I was really involved in our campus ministry,
Hmm.
which was so fun. Like sometimes I think about how fun like those nights were, and just
Right.
it was so cool. I love that I got to be a part of that. But yeah, I think education is just it's really important to my family, and it became really important to me. I would say maybe in like middle school or so I became really like laser focused on,
Right.
getting really good grades.
Right.
So
That's awesome. Like I said, I love it. I'm huge college advocates, so I love that so much.
That's
Um, the next thing we're going to cover, I had to talk about this whenever I plan to have you on. I said, okay, I always do this whenever I have someone on. I sit down and I say, okay, what do I want my audience, to learn from this person? And one thing we had to cover with you is the Enneagram numbers system. So, I actually learned about it from you a while back, and since then it has kind of taken over. I tell everybody, I'm like, what's your Enneagram? And they take the test. It's super cool. I love it. So,
it just consumes your life after
it really does. And it's
so
crazy
great.
how accurate it is. It's just like you look at it and you're like, oh my word, this is me on paper.
Yes,
Like crazy.
absolutely, yes.
So, how has the Enneagram, first off, you're 2, right?
I'm a 3.
You're 3. Okay, awesome. I'm a 3 too. That's cool. 3
Oh,
link
that's
2, I think.
awesome.
So,
Yep,
yeah,
that's
it's
what I am.
awesome.
That's what I am.
Awesome. So cool. So, how has the Enneagram helped you, understand people around you? What's one of the things you've noticed that like you're like, this makes it easier to understand? So, how has it helped you?
I learned about it I want to say maybe a year and a half ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I just became really obsessed with it a couple of weeks ago, where I'm like the other day I made my whole section of our floor at my work take it, my boss, I made him take it, my whole team, I was like, you're gonna take this,
You
we're
have
just
to.
all do yeah, I need to know what you are as soon as possible, so I can profile you and I can know everything that you're thinking. So
That's hilarious.
I made our youth team take it, our leadership team at church, my parents, who were kind of
That's
okay, we'll
They're
take
like,
it.
sure.
Okay, fine. But I think after everyone takes it, it's kind of funny because they're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This is pretty spot on.
Right.
I think for me, it's kind of I like knowing what people's Enneagram is because I like understanding people and trying to figure out why it is they make certain decisions or why they react certain ways. And if you kind of understand what's motivating people or what's driving them, you can kind of understand oh, okay, I won't be offended with that because they weren't trying to offend me. This is just the way they're wired.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it kind of helps me to understand people more.
Yes, yes, that's great. I know. And one of the things that I love is it focuses on your strengths and your weaknesses because
Yeah.
I know so many times we can either get super focused on our weaknesses or we get super focused on our strengths. And whenever we combine them both, we get an accurate picture. We're like, oh, well, I understand, like you said, why you're doing that, or so yes, I love it. So what is one of your favorite resources? If somebody's new out there to the Enneagram, give them one of your favorite resources for it.
My number one favorite thing is Sandals Church. You can find this on YouTube or podcast. Sandals Church, Pastor Matt Brown, he has a series, and I think the series is just called You.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just called You, but they have they have a sermon for every single Enneagram type, and
That's
it
great.
reads your mail. It is so good. I had our assistant pastor take the test, and I was like, there's a sermon you can watch that goes with your Enneagram. And he was like, okay, send me the link. So I sent him the link, and then the next day he was like, oh, this was so good. Thanks for sending this to me.
That's great.
I mean, come on. So I'm trying to convince my dad to
That's hilarious. That's great.
Or to watch it. Yeah.
Right. So that's awesome. Yeah. I'll actually link it whenever I find it, I'll link it down below so that all of you guys that are watching, you can click on it, find yours. So now we're going to get into the fun round, which this is less deep questions, just more get to know you questions. So, I know you're coffee obsessed. Likewise, I am. It's crazy. But I love coffee so much. So, what is your go-to coffee order?
Well, it's kind of a house coffee because now that we have 2 coffee machines, we kind of invested in a coffee machine.
Hey, I'm here for that. I'm totally here for that. That's great.
I mean, so we never get coffee out ever. We might get Starbucks once every couple, once a month or something if we're going somewhere. If we have a gift card, because I just like our house coffee. So usually I'll have I have an espresso machine. So usually I'll have Nespresso with hazelnut creamer. Or if we're doing my Rebel machine, then I'll do a double shot with milk and some salted caramel syrup. Nice. Those are my two go-tos.
Nice. I know. I love caramel. I just started doing my own iced coffees at home. I got all the equipment and do my own iced coffee. So I'm like, oh, like this is good, but it's also really bad at the exact same time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because then you're just like, let me just have coffee like at multiple times during
Right.
the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not the type of person where like I can drink it and then just like go to bed right after. It keeps me like up,
Oh,
obviously.
really?
Yes, so I have to be careful because I'll be drinking it at like
Yeah.
3 o'clock, and I'm like, I have to go to bed tonight. But yeah, I know I love coffee. So
The best.
if what is one of your favorite books ever? Like your top 10 list of books. What's one of your favorite?
I'll do authors because they have like multiple books that I love. So Donald Miller, anything by him is fantastic. Blue Lake Jazz, A Thousand Miles, just he has so many great books. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, anything by him is pretty much gold. He's kind of like an author who he kind of puts you in like a different place. Like you can just it's his books are like candy. You know,
Uh-huh.
like those books
Yeah.
where you just can keep reading and
Right.
reading. It's
Right.
not
Can't
hard.
put it down. Yeah.
But at the same time, like you'll be laughing because he's so funny. And then like 2 pages later, you're like in Starbucks crying. You're like, this guy, like, I mean, and like he's a Christian author and he just
Uh-huh.
like he hits at home. Like he's so great.
Wow.
Another favorite, a little bit different note is Gene Edwards, and he's written books like Prisoner in the Third Cell and Tale of Three Kings. Like a lot of people know Tale of Three
Mm-hmm.
Kings. Divine Romance is another favorite of his, and his books are like they basically break down like a famous story in the
Uh-huh.
Bible, and it takes you so deep in like of what really would have happened, you
Right.
know,
Wow.
and it just blows your mind, and then you're just crying,
Wow.
you're just and on your couch just listening.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I love it. Okay, so if you could only pick one store to shop at for the rest of your life, what would it be?
BCBG Max Azria.
I knew that was one of your favorites. That's so
That's
cool.
like I used to work there my freshman year of college, and I got 75% off.
Hey,
So I had a lot of stuff, and then
right.
now I just get all their stuff off Poshmark.
Nice. Nice. I love
So
it. I
yeah.
love it.
Well,
Okay, so when you're feeling unmotivated to do something, what's one thing that you can do that will like turn your mood around and make you motivated?
coffee. I always have a coffee if I'm feeling
Right.
unmotivated.
That one.
Oh wait, yes, another coffee. Let's just add it to the list. I think cooking really helps me to kind of like unwind. Like it's
Mhm,
kind of weird. I look forward to like making dinner.
mhm.
So I'm like such a nerd about it. Um, so yeah, like if I get home after a really stressful day where I like will just want to go take a nap and like forget responsibilities, I'll just cook and kind of like chill out, you know, and
Right.
unwind, and it kind of helps me to be motivated again.
I love it. Yeah. Also, if you guys do not follow her on social media, which I'm going to put her links down below, you need to. But she shares amazing recipes. You just started doing that. Their videos, great, great, great stuff. I love them so much. So definitely go
Thank
check those
you.
out. Every single time I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see them, I'm like, now I'm hungry. Thank you. But they
You can
look
just come over and I'll make you some.
right, right. Drive right over, coming.
Right over.
No, we seriously need to do that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is one place you haven't traveled to yet but want to go?
Hmm. We have a trip that we're planning in 2020, which is a little bit in advance. But we were going to go here for our honeymoon actually, and then we kind of decided on something different. But Budapest and Vienna, that's like our
Nice.
next trip. Yeah.
Nice. Fun times. I can't wait to see the pictures. They're gonna be great. Um,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah. Okay, and then we all know we're all jealous, I think, of your closet. We love it so much. Okay, so where do you get your fashion inspo from?
Um, there's a couple different like models that I follow that I like, but I think like overall I just like really classic timeless pieces
Mhm.
that, you know, in 10 years or 15 years my kids won't be like, what were you wearing? You know, when you see those
What
pictures of
were
your
you
mom and
thinking?
you're like,
Yes,
what in
yes,
the
yes,
world?
yes.
So I don't ever want to have that moment. So I try to
Right,
just wear things that like would have looked good in the 60s, you know, like
right,
would have
right.
my grandma's probably like my number one inspo. She would
That's
always have
cute.
a really crisp white blouse on and a high-waisted skirt and pointy toe stilettos, and she always had a little perfume tray with all her
Aw.
perfumes. And
Yeah.
I think I just wanted that. Like I just wanted to, be like that timeless. So I guess she's a big inspo for me.
Aw, I love that. That's so cute. Okay, so the final question that I always like to end with is super cool because some people have different answers, some people have similar answers, and I love seeing all of them. So, what advice would you give, your younger self or other young people out there? Maybe they want to be an author, maybe they want to be involved in ministry. What advice would you give them, the people that want to make a difference in their world? What advice would you give them?
I think that there are a million people doing the same thing. And you're never going to really do something that somebody hasn't already done. Even the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. And I
Right,
think it kind of took me a while to get to the point where I was like, even though there's a million people who like to do this same thing, no one can do it the exact same way that you can.
mm,
I
yeah,
think really just getting to a place where you're like, it doesn't matter if someone else has already done this. They haven't done it the way that I would. And
mm,
kind of just, getting rid of the fear and or at least ignoring the fear.
right, right,
And just being like, you know what, I'm going to embark on this adventure and I'm going to do it my way. And people sense authenticity. I think
mhm,
when you're trying to like replicate somebody else's voice or their tone or their style, people can smell that,
right,
like
right,
they know.
right.
But when someone's authentic, people are just drawn to them because even though there are, a million people who are interested in the same things that I am,
Mhm.
they're not doing it like I am, and I'm not doing it the
Right.
way they're doing it. Like, the individuality really, I think, speaks for itself. So I
Mhm.
would just say, just be who God has created you to be. Don't be like a carbon copy of somebody else. Just choose to be unique. Choose
Yeah.
to be who God has created you to be.
Yeah. Being comfortable in you. I love that. I love that so much. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
I have
you.
loved this. I've loved getting to know you. So your book, where can they find your book at?
So they can purchase it on my website, which
Okay.
is in my Instagram bio. It's just
Okay.
the blue link. You hit it and it will take you there.
Awesome. And I'll link your socials down below. Like I said before, when y'all are scrolling through social media, I cannot talk. When you're scrolling through social media, you need people like Nicole in your feed that uplift you and inspire you and motivate you. I know there's so much talk about the negative impact of social media, but I seriously think it's all about who you follow and who you choose to follow. So I'm going to put your links down below for your socials, as well as your website so that they can go and click on it. So, once again,
Thank you
thank you so
so
much
much.
for being on. I loved this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Aw.